I'm going to talk this afternoon on what we call InnovationIQ. Now, where I'm going to start is not where normally people start, but I suppose in some ways this is one score, to paraphrase Tolkien, one score to measure them all, and in the innovation darkness bind them, if you know any of the Lord of the Rings history. And really what we're trying to look at here is a whole raft of innovation capabilities. And we're trying to rid that darkness out of your organisation, because there's a lot you can do in your organisation, and you are doing, that you probably don't know about. And it's not just about looking at those gaps to close and improve, it's also about exploiting things you do really well, or things you may be capable of doing. So where I'm going to start first is not necessarily where we'd start. I'm going to start with innovation standards. And this standard was released in February this year. And it's something that 46 countries in Europe, including the UK, agree on. So this is based off the European set of standard sets. There was 7 pieces in that, there's 5 in this. And the one that we're working around this afternoon is innovation management assessment. And that's what the InnovationIQ is, it's an innovation management assessment. Now, in terms of then guidance, this is what it says in here, but the short of this is, if you look at everything involved in here in terms of adding value or challenging the organisational strategy and objectives, that's what the assessment does, and the IQ score can help you with. When we talked a lot about organisational development in here as well, so there's lenses in this scoring for looking at personas and leadership and culture mapping as well. And then it's got to be 2 things. It's got to be saying how we're doing today and how we're exploiting our existing current business, and then how we're setting up, and have we got a future orientation as well. And you also got to allow for the context and adoption of best practice, and that's what standards are. So there was some debate going around when this was released, should there be standards on innovation? Isn't it some magical process? And that's not necessarily the case, because it's been shown with data that we've got from a database as well, that radical innovators are actually far more systematic in the way they go about innovation, and that's what makes them get radical results. So it's taking that scariness out of that word radical, because we often have that. Everybody's happy with incremental innovation, nice return on investment, sure things. When you introduce that word radical, it gets a little bit scary, but when you break it down, it's not. It's just starting. And this allows also for encompassing things that we heard before. So, as Alan keeps telling everybody, it's 70% collaboration and it's 20% creativity. And I think that these ones here cover that as well. In this next one, don't get scared by this diagram. Okay, that's from the standard. The only reason I'm putting that in there, anybody who's done quality work will start to recognise some of these little numbers in around here. These standards is written in exactly the same way, clauses, structure, as your ISO 9001 standards. So we heard people talk this morning about not an innovation management system. How are we going to implement that? We haven't got room to put that in there. These 2 things can align really well, and you can embed what the standards are asking for into your ISO 9001, which is probably your business management system now in your organisation. So that's the only reason that I show that. And so if you think about ISO 9001, the quality standard is doing things better, and the innovation standard is doing better things, then we're able to do better things better. You might come back quickly. What context do we put this in? Because most organisations are not happy with the results that they're getting from innovation. In fact, there was a PwC study that said only 6% of executives were happy with their innovation efforts. That means 94% aren't. And yet we're still choosing to do all this innovation that we're not happy with. So having process and systems sounds like another good idea. And for most organisations, your trajectory is always a lot lower than where your ambition is. And that's what we call the growth and profit gap. And that's what we're trying to close with innovation. And we're trying to do it across 3 horizons. And we've heard some really good examples today about Horizon 1, exploiting the existing business today. We heard that in HealthShare especially, that was great. But then you've also got Horizon 2, that's that next mountain to climb, which is where we're going to get growth in our services from for the next, and how we're going to really exploit, do something a little bit more to get really, instead of like incremental little steps going in our Horizon 1, how can we take a lift up a couple of floors and get that sort of innovation going? So that's what Horizon 2 is about. And it's also about taking those things that you've been investigating and learning and exploring and turning them into a business model and maybe into a business somewhere in your organisation. So that's what it's supposed to do. And Horizon 3, of course, is just looking at options. whether that's technology, whether that's learning. So across those three, H1 is very much return on investment. H2 is business model, if you like, trying to get scenarios down. And Horizon 3 is learning, trying to close that gap between where we are and where we want to be. So this system, global system for rating, it does a lot of things in terms of managing innovation across the organisation. It's also in terms of aligning efforts with key initiatives and organisational capabilities. And like you said, the ones that you've got capability for, but you might not be exploiting them. And we can also then manage intelligently across these three horizons, because the style of leadership you use for your Horizon 1 business is totally different for things that you're trying to do for your Horizon 2 and your Horizon 3. And every organisation ends up with its own sort of unique, innovative culture. And you need fill gaps and you need to exploit strengths. And then overall, we're looking at aligning leadership, core capabilities and culture. And we heard it before, back to strategic initiatives as well. So you might have guessed it's on a 100-point scale, and it's balancing 92 critical benchmarks. And these are 92 benchmarks that come from a whole framework, which I'm not going to have time to go into today. And what we want to really is trying to be effective innovators in specified fields and then manage that innovation projects for sustainable growth and profits. Okay, so really what it is a roadmap for implementation, easy to read metrics. So for people in organisations that need metrics in there, then it's across there. It covers capabilities. It improves your reputation as an innovator and gives you proof by having an InnovationIQ score. And it can enhance your brand or enhance your standing with your stakeholders and fund givers. Now, I've just summarised these down, but basically there's bands within here for certification in there. And you can see that there's organisations here that range from very low scores to very high scores. And we get one final score from this analysis and survey we do on an organisation, and you end up somewhere in the bandwidth. Now, depending on the size of the organisation, depends on how many surveys or polls that you need to do to get the scores. And then we can accumulate those in different ways. So often you'll hear people talk about large corporations and thinking of them as being innovative or not in a certain band. But if you really want to make innovation work in organisations, you have to break that down into structures. And what I'm going to show you next is a breakdown of a particular organisation. So this is one that we did an assessment on. And in this, there's actually 75 polls to try and cover the whole organisation. This is a global org. So we're covering here countries, we're covering regions, 2 separate divisions. And within the one organisation, we've got scores or InnovationIQ scores that are running from just under 20 to into the 90s. And yet when you talk about this company, if I could tell you the name of it, you'd say, oh yeah, they must be pretty good on innovation across the board. And yet there's such a huge variance on there in terms of their scoring scores through there. So as a group, you could say there's 61. So the board of directors meeting in wherever they meet is going to go, wow, 61, we're not sitting too bad. But there's a lot of room for improvement across this organisation. The nice thing about this too is that in terms of, for example, one of the personas that we use there is cross-pollination. You're able to move people and ideas across organisations by having this detailed information and work out who's really good at innovating at certain things. Because innovation is not all about your products and services. It could also be processes, it could be organisation, it could be management systems, it could be business model, it could be how you produce. So this sort of insights, then together with the next level, helps organisations in their innovation efforts. So you get this sort of a platform. That's one of the metrics. I'm not going to go through all of those as well, but this is a footprint around 16 aspects of innovation. There's 66 capabilities behind there. There'll be no surprise to people that there's 11 capabilities around process and 9 around organisation. So a third of them are in 2 aspects. And that's what this is about. And that's why teams and the future of teams is really important, because that's how innovation gets done in organisations. It's systematic, it's process, it's management system driven, and you need to be able to get insights to be able to make it work. And then in terms of innovation metrics, this is just a glance over the top. So there's some strategic and tactical metrics which we can look at, which is you do an assessment now, and then we might do an assessment into the future as well, and you get benchmark values. So part of the Innovation IQ is there is a large database. We believe it's the world's largest database of capabilities for the number of organisations that have gone through and done this assessment. Now, officially we talk about 1,000 organisations in 62 countries, but it's much higher than that. It's a factor of on that. And therefore we've got a huge database to be able to tell what does the top quartile of innovators look like, and you can break that down into industries and you can break that down into countries. And it's really quite different to see what happens in each type of organisation. But going quickly through those, there's ones for innovation strategy, whether you're a need-seeking organisation or you're a technology-driven one for your innovation, or whether you're a market reader. We can tell whether you're innovating mainly for profit or mainly for growth. We can tell whether you're a radical innovator or an incremental innovator. And then we can also talk to you about leadership styles. As you can imagine, the leadership style required for innovating in today's business is totally different from trying to explore things out that are going to come into your business in 5 years' time. And then there's personas. When we look at personas, we don't say Alan's this type of persona for innovation or Belinda's this type of persona. We talk about these are the personas that people need to do to get innovation work done in here. And they tend to be learning personas, or they need to be organising personas or building personas. And then we have a culture mapping tool in there as well, and capability, and of course process. Tomorrow, so we end up with a high Innovation IQ score here after assessing all of these. And tomorrow in the workshop, we're going to link then competences to capabilities, but we'll just focus on leadership, personas, and this innovation process, which is ideating, selecting, developing, and commercialising. It's a fast process too. We can go from woe to go in an organisation with surveys and get it done inside an 8-week period. So you've got recommendations inside this quarter and being able to get moved. And in summary, so it is possible to measure and assess some leadership strategy for innovation. It also is able to strengthen leadership and capabilities for innovation, and also gives us a roadmap then to link strategy and innovation for execution.